our creative powerhouse is 204, and that's where we build technology that we really think needs to be sovereign. So a lot of the AI we build is something you can run with decent hardware yourself. And then on the second part of it, we have a studio here very close to Zebra. It's called RNA Studio, and it really wants people to come in and hopefully you take over the space and you leave something behind.
I got an amazing surprise because I was willing to bring Cynthia and Dim from a very, very amazing place you guys need to know. And it was still a way to kind of to arrange the dates. I went to their space. The space is amazing. You're going to have the chance to tell more about. But thank you very much, Dim, for a round of applause to our great guest. It usually I am on my aquarium when talking about art, when talking about music. All the time when I was speaking with my friend Andy, we were discussing that I am right now. We need to establish a business that creates scale, does a lot of money, and then when that happens, it is about time to create arts, music only. Like, of course, still with a transactional structure, but exclusively dedicating for music, arts, technology, all we want. Now is the phase to be very transactional. Not that I am complaining, but with guests like you that is from arts, it is like also our friend Broyden. I get absolutely more relaxed because this is my ground of happiness. Dim, thank you very much for joining us. Can you explain a little bit to us? You feel free to do the layers of explanation the way you want. But what I suggest is you talk a little bit about RNA, Portugal, and then you tell how you fit in the story. And you feel free to navigate to explain anything aspect about the concept, the vision. The stage is yours.
Okay. Well, maybe I can take the angle of questions that were racing through my mind over different periods in my life.
Sure.
I recall when I was like 10, my uncle had a flower shop. And flowers, this was like early 90s, 92, 93. So get this, he brought in this computer in the flower shop to make orders to other shops, and you could like have a internet of flowers. Like suddenly I pronounced myself to be the admin of this computer. And I just want to know what happens between pushing a button on the keyboard and getting a chart on the screen. So that took me pretty much 20 years to like really, I studied microelectronics. I made my own computer chips. I essentially started making simulation models, physical computer aided designs software in order to like predict what would happen to those designs in specific environments. Like what if they go into space? What if they end up in a nuclear reactor? What if like a hot particle strikes this? What does happen to this thing, right? You'll see the same if you want to design maybe an airplane and look at the turbulence, or a bridge and you look at the forces when it starts resonating, all these things. It's the same kind of thing, you know, trying to like model physics into a computer. So that was a layer of meta abstraction. I knew now how to make chips, and now I knew how to make simulations of chips. And every time I got to that point, I was like, this is how it works. I was like, oh, now I'm kind of like, I wouldn't say disinterested, but like, it's this point where, you know, when you understand something, it becomes a primitive in my brain, I think in many others, and you start synthesizing new things from there. So you go deep into analysis,
Okay,
and then you go into synthesis. You build up further. And so I ended up in this beautiful kind of theoretical framework called systems theory. The theory of systems and cybernetics and how inputs and outputs relate to each other. And I was learning in 2008, that's already a while ago, we were playing with early machine learning. AI was for slides. You put, oh, we're doing AI. It only happened at a PowerPoint presentation. We were actually doing machine learning, trying to make machines learn things. And the only way we could do that was to look at nature and see how nature learns things. So this is this whole concept of biomimicry. Early AI models were based on things like how ants in colonies leave trails of pheromones in order to instruct other ants where the food is. Or when bees in beehives, when they look for a source of food and they find it, they come back to the hive, they make a little dance. The dance will tell them the direction and the duration of the flight. And you have other cool stuff like genetic algorithms. You would code a problem as little parameters you can change as a DNA string. And then you spawn a gigantic population of these things and make them cross mutate and evolve over time to find a good solution. And then finally, you also have the human brain you can model with neurons and connections. That's where we end up now.
Wow.
That's most of the AI now is based on that part of biomimicry. So that always stayed with me. Then I had a whole journey through blockchain. In 2014, we started building provenance systems for Bitcoin for artists. So we did like this first of limited editions of things onto the Bitcoin protocol pre-Ethereum. Ethereum made things really easier to develop standards. Like the NFT standard had the limited editions and the transfer and all these things in it. But the goal was different. Initially, we wanted to really have a way to track digital authenticity, how it spreads over the web. We were much connected to the internet kind of freedom fighter culture. Like you had the decentralized web, the EFF, and all these others. And it was really about creating provenance databases, the golden truth, to then find out like if things go viral on the web, what was the source of creation? We even had a tool called Where on the Net where you could track how something spread over time over the web.
Kind of breadcrumbs, or I was like,
Yeah,
understanding.
exactly. We called it breadcrumbs. We also worked with Internet Archive and other. And then NFTs became like more a mutant version, which is interesting to learn about, like how to design tokenomics, right? Like you have to like anticipate what behaviors are in the system. So systems theory came back for me. So we had this token engineering thing where we learned systems theory for tokenomics, where we would learn how to model behaviors in the system,
Okay.
play them out. A lot of cool stuff happened there. Like this artwork is always for sale using harbor taxes. You have proof of weak hands. You had FOMO 3D. You had bonding curves. You had token curated registries. All this stuff still has to come back. You know, like 2017, 18 was the golden years for really exploring what does it mean if the blockchain is a medium for expression. Anyways, diverging. So I was wondering about all these things, and then I got to where you are, like trying to make a scalable business. But then I learned about Ikigai. Ikigai is this Japanese compass. It has like 4 quadrants. For those who don't know, it's like the things you're good at, the things you love, the things the world needs or you think the world needs, and the things you can make money with, sustain it.
Yes.
And I could see myself doing these travels throughout. And I gave myself an Ikigai reading. I could do one as well for you at some point in the future.
Sure.
Allows you to understand where you are, where you want to go, and how you might combine things. And for me, I could understand like, well, I'm pretty good at going deep. I love showing people what I'm seeing all the time because I see these overlays on nature and these things, patterns that I learned, and I want to share that with the world. I love sharing that. I think what the world needs is a vision of alternatives and empathy within that. And the things we can make money with is obviously we understand these new technologies pretty fast, and we can help creating products that are relevant because we would like to use them ourselves. I don't like to make a product for someone else with specs that I don't endorse. But if I say like, oh, I'm going to build something that I'm going to use, I'm going to really kill it. I'll try to kill it. And because I'm going to use it and I'm going to love it. So yeah, that's
I got super fascinated with what you said about biomimicry.
mimicry. Yeah,
Biomimicry. I remember two things. I remember the way that the Japanese did the metro station
exactly.
with
Yeah,
fungus,
yeah, yeah,
and right,
yeah.
is
It's
related
very
to that.
related. Very related. Yeah.
This when I saw that, I got how fungus, how fungus, right, or
Yeah.
mushrooms,
So this was a one cellular organism, but it's pretty much similar as rhizomatic structures like fungi.
right?
Yeah.
Just like and another what you were speaking gave me also remembering that sometimes people uh, disregards all the type of what is this word in English is sentient being sentient
Sentient. Yeah.
sentient. Sometimes we as humans we disregards all the type of sentience patterns or intelligence because maybe they don't speak the way we speak. But now also something that you remind me while we're speaking about that the sea as is will be considered as a sentient being given the patterns that the scientists are collecting. I think you might be interested on this as well because they are collecting not anymore kind of how can I say random stuff or signs or beeps and boops, but is really full intelligence with meaning behind. And while we were speaking, I said, "Wow, this is so interesting." Another thing that when you were speaking kind of pop up in my brain was creating the concept of a chip inside of the virtual reality, and then reminds me this Minecraft computer that was
Yeah.
creating that.
Yeah.
Can you explain just a little bit for us? I got so fascinated that it's possible to create a chip or a computer inside of a virtual reality and
Yeah.
has no pretty much differentiation of how the physical one works. Can you?
Yeah. It's well, it's a little bit like we know if we play games online or on the Xbox or PlayStation, whatnot, we know there's a physics engine. If you jump, you're going to fall down because they implemented a thing like gravity or a simulation of gravity in that world. So that's essentially what you're going to do. Like you're going to look at a system that has physical properties. These physical properties are pretty much dependent on what are you modeling. If we are using computer chips, there are things like Kirchhoff laws, there's Maxwell laws, there's maybe ways how materials at nanoscale are being influenced by stress and other mechanisms on that. Like, so you can take all these laws of nature and put them in a computer. And then you can model a big system. Let's say we model, for example, a lever or just a beam that's on a hinge like this, right? If I push this, it's going to vibrate. Why it's vibrating is because, well, it's hinging here and it's not going to crack if I don't push too hard. And when I push down, there's going to be stress here that pushes it up again. And then when it's up again, it's going to, this hinge going to try to push it down again. But it all has inertia. It has some loss inside and it's going to like dampen it out. And the way it's going to dampen, the way it's going to do all these things depends on the type of materials you're using, the type of like elastic coefficients that are in, and we know this from physics. We know this from how Newton laws work. Now we can put these models inside of a computer and make them rasterized, like very small sections. We can like basically put the material in there as a property and apply those rules inside of this little volume, and then have an interface and say like, well, if something pushes on you, you'll push on your neighbor, And then you say that to the neighbor, you're going to push on your neighbor, you're going to push on your neighbor, right? And you're going to lose a little bit in the meantime, right? So you can take almost any system, whether that's an electrical system, whether that's a mechanical system, whether that's an aerodynamic system.
Into a digital one.
Yeah, and you can basically quantize or rasterize it, and then you can apply those physics to it.
Man, you are talking something so amazing, and I'm sorry if you're digressing, but the conversation is so good, because when you start to grasp into this singularity, quantum computing, and understanding that right at this moment there is already kind of software emulating basically everything on thermodynamics, physics, in which you can reproduce and test things more effectively in the digital world before you put into life. And then one day, in a conversation with a friend as well, we start to go deeper on this conversation, and then we came to the point understanding that when computing power, it is enough powerful to simulate and emulate all aspects of life, in terms of emulating the atoms on all senses, the reactions, and etc. It is absolutely understandable that life, the digital virtual life, will be absolutely no difference from the real life, especially if you give intelligence for the beings that are there. And then the conversation was more deeper, and we start speaking about physical transmutation and editing life or real life the same way you can edit the digital realm. When you understand that with the enough power or acceleration of the particles, you can change a element of a periodic table just with the number of protons, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can change from being plumb, from being lead to gold, just changing the number of protons, right? When you start to understand that changing reality as you make something appear or disappear, changing a scarce material like gold from wood to gold, or maybe wood to gold, not because some material that is on the periodic table that is very abundant to gold.
Yeah, for carbon to go from carbon to gold, you have to like keep on banging those nucleus together till they swallow.
If you put your mind understanding that today we can do that we need to spend trillions of dollars to change a small portion from carbon to gold. But whenever you transpose your mind and you put the perspective, understanding that singularity, quantum computing, and everything else will kind of potentialize everything that we're seeing, eventually changing the reality the way we see will be a matter of years counting from now. And then it makes you rethink about what is intelligence, what is reality, man. And
yeah, like, look, this is super interesting, right? I do think we digress, but I do think we should spend a little bit of attention to this, because there's a few things I would like to highlight. One of these is emergence, right? It's not because, in our brain, what I used to do is I try to kind of model the brain as a system, like an electronical system, and there is something called the Hodgkin-Huxley model, which looks at like how your neurons are built up and how they transmit signals when they get triggered over a threshold. And that's a very physical explanation of like how electricity and a little bit of like, let's say, atoms move throughout your neuron axon. All these connections create new connections as well. But then in the end, we do make up like a whole version of ourselves and the world around us. So we're like, and that's, I think, like 3 levels of abstraction that emerges above that, right? It comes out of this like super simple principle. Like, the concept of murmuration. When some birds, when they go into a flock, they create like these huge patterns in the sky. They go whoosh, And they create like these huge things, and they're based on like super simple rules. They're like, oh, I'm gonna look at my neighbor left and right, and I'm gonna see if he taps, I tap, and tack tack, and like this super simple local behavior emerges into global behavior. Conway's game of life is a very beautiful example of an online version of like a very simple local rule system that creates these amazing patterns and sustainable things. They even made a computer in this type of thing. So yeah, we are not there yet. The second part that connects to this is something you could call, well, people call quantum biology. Quantum biology is learning how quantum fields that are all permeating us at like different levels of energy. At the highest level, you have Higgs and gravity. At the lower levels, you see like electromagnetism, and then you have the weak nuclear powers and the strong nuclear powers that makes the particles, and some particles interact in some fields. There are all fluctuations in those fields. We are 100% made out of that. Now, what we learned is that like, whoa, some of our sensorial systems with us and animals are actually based on these quantum fields. Like the way we smell is not just like I have a molecule that fits into a nose receptor and then it's gonna like, hey, tango. It does that, but it would only allow us to differentiate maybe 100 smells, but we can do millions. What happens is they tango, and then you have a quantum tunnel effect that's kind of playing like a harmonic vibration on top of that and create all these subtle flavors. Birds that find their way in the magnetic field are actually shooting entangled photons in their eyes, and the magnetic field will intercept that, and they will work with that in order to know like, oh, more left is north, more left is north, right is north. You'll see this in how our DNA is being mutated by also kind of like quantum tunneling throughout of protons that fly through it, and they make like random disruptions in there. There's tons of other examples. So now we have to accept like, whoa, we're affected by quantum. We didn't know that. You know, these slowest little fields creating these emergent properties at our levels of perceptions, and probably also more universal scale things, right? So this is a thing that we as humans are facing now, like, wait a minute, something very small can emerge into something pretty brilliant and intelligent. Is it only human? Can it be a sea? Can it be an ocean? Can it be a more bigger system than ourselves? And how does that affect us? And does that also yield a form of intelligence that we haven't been able to cross because we're so egotistic, right? We think human apex. Well, think again. Yeah.
Absolutely, and what you're sharing is so cool. It is that eventually intelligence is something that already exists and it's just limited by the hardware. So it is the same intelligence, but is connected to the hardware of a bird. It's the same like if you pick a software to run in a small computer like Raspberry Pi. I mean, needs to be a software easy, you know. I don't know. You don't understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And then if you take a quantum computing, the software for sure. And whenever you have the understanding of the pattern of scale of the universe, as I think you understood already, you stop watching things as big and small. But just a matter of facts, we human beings are not better. We are just the same intelligence that will exist and exist.
Well,
For
we have a DNA molecule
yeah,
that carries that intelligence, and it's quantizable. We can count them,
right.
right? But it still can be cultivated into like a smart being. So that's pretty remarkable.
I think when you get this level of consciousness, you start looking. This is recently, just like 2-3 years, looking to other beings and saying, maybe if my intelligence was put on this hardware, I would be the same.
Yeah,
The same. I mean, I would be limited by the hardware itself, right?
yeah, actually, so we've been thinking a lot in the past about like what happens if the intelligence substrate ain't carbon and carbon based like humans, but what if it's silicon based like chips? And then in 2011, we made a project called Bright, Brain in Light, which was all about like looking at like how to take optical fibers. Optical fibers, they work by sending signal through internal reflection, and you want that to be perfect. So if you put in an input signal, at the output of your fiber, you see exactly the same thing. And we're like, okay, but if I want to do computation, what if my fiber is distorted? And I put a signal in there and it does something to my signal, it transforms it, it distorts it, and at the output, I get a different signal, but I can predict what it is. If I know the relationship, if I measure my fiber and it says that, oh, I put a signal in here and you get a quadratic signal output, I have a element of compute, a quadratic generator, while just shooting light through it. So these are like new ways of thinking about like, well, mutations on signals that can yield intelligence can happen also in the waveforms and light and electromagnetic spectra propagates throughout the medium and doesn't really have like a sensible substrate anymore. So we haven't seen, we ain't seen nothing yet. I'm very excited about that. Imagine having intelligence that's embedded into like a complex modulated electromagnetic spectrum that is just abundant. Maybe that's already existing around us.
Yeah. Talking about this, for us to go to something more transactional and talking about project itself, just the last one, because the conversation is getting very good, very interesting. It is, you spoke about biomimicry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember also that the researchers understood that the lab-grown brains, it is faster to kind of to process information. And right now there is already, you can rent space on lab-grown brains to run some software and tests.
Exactly, but this is fuzzy logic systems. And you're right. So what they do, and it's the same as with the optical fiber. I'm glad you made a connection. What they have been doing is like creating like, well, initially it was rat brains where they put a probe in and then measured what if I put a signal on that probe and then measure on other parts of the brain. What does it do to this signal? And let's characterize it and use it as an element of computation. And that's what you're seeing there.
Wow, amazing. Man, with all, I think now the picture is pretty much kind of closing in terms of, last time I've been to the space in which you are involved in the 204 with Cynthia and also Braden. It is pretty much, when I went there, you're pretty much super open to observe how people interact with the things and open for the new ideas to come, to create new things, and also to express what people has in their minds in terms of desires or brand expression, arts. Can you tell a little bit how this, as you said in the beginning, you like go deep into things, how this deep understanding about everything right now is being put into use into this amazing house, into the project you're leading?
So we have this, I call it a lab. It's RNA studio in Lisbon. It's very close to Zebra. I call it a lab. Some call it a gallery. Some call it a artistic atelier. I think it should be all. What I'm personally trying to look at there is like, what if all these like futuristic technologies are already here? Let's remember the future or something. And it's already there surrounding us. How are we going to treat it before it's capitalized? Is there a way for us to like already go 3 years ahead of our time, of the, let's say, the capitalistic timeline, the timeline of Moloch, the god that will always drive this inertia of the world so we can't change it?
Mm-hmm.
What if we have like a little side paw and glitch a future that is already existing? How are we going to interact with that? Can we create a world where we put soul and intention and emotion back into tech? I guess I love San Francisco, but a few things I didn't really like about it is more about like how it got capitalized by using that technology for extraction and censorship and domination of worlds and kind of getting into digital colonialism and all these things. I think we can do better. That's why I'm betting on artists really hard, and artists as polymaths. Doesn't have to be like necessarily the Bradens of the world perfect, but I also want to have the visionaries. I also want to have those Web3 crafters, the new sets of vibe coders that are coming out, the philosophers that I've been working in. They all need to be present now, and they all need to get these things in their hands in the way they want to communicate with it, so they can put their intention in it, and we get a fully democratized, multi-versatile spectrum of like how to design the interfaces of the future when technology is apex over humans. So we now actually, this is kind of interesting exhibition where you enter as a prehistorian caveman and the gods are all around you and they're AI gods and you can summon them and you have to bang rocks together in specific patterns and all these things to just show like, look, not further in the future and we'll create a discrepancy of us simple human beings just want to vibe, and this technological layer that hopefully is neutral, but probably at this point in time not looking to be neutral at any point in time.
Yeah, you touch. We are running to, sadly, but for sure, we're gonna have another time to have a cool conversation. What I spoke about us having some cool podcast. Now I think this would be very, very interesting. But the theme of today, Quantum Post, and the reason that I wanted to create an interview in which it is not restricted to talk about only the tech, structure of everything, is to give space to transcend the conversation of technology exactly to the human, to the other things, ethics, society. And I think the conversation that we're having here is pretty much that fine tune between human and technology. The theme of the today's the Quantum Post is the lack of female energy balancing, to find this point in which not everything is supposed to have a meaning or a purpose, because all the time we live in this maximalist society. Is that's the name, that everything needs to have some purpose, everything needs to have a market, and at some point is a type of subversive and beautiful when you take a space and, as you said, detached from this hyper capitalist maximalist society and say this will be a, how can I say, balanced space. If you want to use for transactional, okay, but also give space for interacting with these toys, with these tools in an intuitive way without anybody telling you the good practice. The same, like we spoke, right, Bryden, the interaction with an instrument of music. If you all the time having a teacher slamming your head because you're playing the piano wrong, the thing that the least you're gonna want to be willing to see ahead of you again is a piano. But I think the lab tool for and what you're building together as a collective, it is giving space for people to interact with the future technology in peace and as a kids, right? And I think this is, I can be really wrong, but I think this is the first and the only place in Portugal that this is a reality, in which is coming people from Belgium, Australia, down under, like Men at Work used to say, Brazil, Portugal, Ukraine. And I think I am very satisfied with this interview. I'm very satisfied with what you brought to Portugal. My mission will be to make more and more people to learn about this sandbox, this free sandbox. And I am super excited to see how the collaboration Web3 District can unfold with 204 and what you've been doing.
Well, that means a lot to me, man. Like, yeah, that's exactly, I'd say, what I hope for. Like, I have this inner passion, I would call it the calling of our community, is to give people wings to fly and a reason to stay. We seen so many interesting people come in and feel like a kid and like just forget about the other world, about the outside anxiety world that is being pressured upon us, and just be in peace and being obsessed by something and being intrigued and being mesmerized and being synesthetic and understanding things about agency All these things come together, hopefully. And yeah, I'm happy to like educate as well. I love to share my passions, and I love to find metaphors that make sense of it, because I used to teach a lot in universities and whatnot, and in the blockchain space. And every lesson I gave, I learned something myself. I learned to like displace myself into the looks of someone, how somebody else looks at the problem, and that would sharpen my way of understanding a thing, or the way people want to understand something.
Indexed by their curiosity, right?
It's it's such a driving force.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need to finish this interview. It was amazing pleasure to have you here, Dim. I had the thought today to send a message to Cynthia, and I got two amazing gifts to be spoken here for sure. I'm going to speak with Cynthia on June 12th. I have also brought in here to speak with us, but I'm very glad. Thank you very much for the interview. Thank you. Thank you. Just feel free to.
I can do the chill pill.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so yeah, I think, well, first of all, we have our creative powerhouse is 204, and that's where we like build technology that we really think needs to be sovereign. So a lot of the AI we build is something you can run with decent hardware yourself. You don't have to go to somebody else's servers and feel there's always something cringe about it's cool tech. And the cringe part about cool tech is that you don't know who's running it for you. But what if you run it yourself? That's so beautiful. So we do that. And then on the second part of it, we have a studio here very close to Zebra. It's called RNA Studio, and it really like wants people to come in, and hopefully you take over the space and you leave something behind. And we have a lot of really interesting people coming through from different disciplines. I love traditional arts. I love to like really get into like the neuropsychology of arts and see how can we create digital therapy, how can we create digital psychedelics, how can we combine it with real psychedelics to create meaningful changes in consciousness drivers. And yeah, we have regular jams, exhibitions. We are super keen to work with artists that have a passion and a really good vibe. And sometimes it's really low tech, high vibes is primary. But we also want to show like, hey, if you have all this high tech around you, like you can talk about it, but what if you feel it? And that's where we're trying to achieve a little bit, like a glimpse in the future by being immersed into it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. One more round of applause of our audience special.